subtext. I know Zach's been exposed to it a bunch of times, but they just need a refresher. I know we went through it in the training that you had. So when we say using subtext, what are we really talking about?
Off the top of my head, like assumptive language?
Assumptive language, yeah.
Is what I've learned from you.
An underlining or underlying meaning, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. So let me just quickly flesh it out in just a very brief way. And language is never neutral. Language always carries with it nuance, assumptive qualities, and a number of other features that are indicative to how we organize ourselves as human beings. As we move into more intimate relationships with people, which a therapeutic relationship is an intimate relationship, as we move into that kind of intimate relationship with people, the way we use language shifts automatically. You know, when you first meet somebody, you exchange content. But as soon as you get to an adequate, and that's going to be different for each person, an adequate connection, you shift from content alone into assumptive or subtext meaning. So if after being married for as long as I have, if my wife says to me, honey, the trash is full, that is not a context message. It is not about the fullness of the trash. The statement is a content statement, but the meaning of it is vastly different than that. There is an underlying assumption that I know that there should be some action taken. There's an underlying idea that there's a value that we both agreed upon, that fullness versus emptiness, there's a value to that. We know that there's a sequence of doing that. We know that someone is probably primarily assigned with doing that. We know the person's being kind of a butt because they aren't doing that. So if I...
Can you use this example?
All of these...
So it's hitting close to home.
All of these assumptives are really what's being communicated. If I treat it as a context message and I look at the trash and I say, gosh, hon, you're exactly right, it is full, and I keep on walking, then that is going to breach our level of intimacy and usually create some kind of disturbance in the relationship. And that's just natural human stuff. Now, we use assumptive language all the time, just like that. And if we've been working with anybody very long in whatever capacity, we're already using it anyway. What I'm going to suggest is that we really need to get better at using that assumptive language with intention to if you will, to highlight competencies rather than to just communicate with, you know, kind of accidental communications. So if, for example, if I think about what am I asking, what are the assumptions that are going with this question that I'm asking? So think assumptions, don't think content, think assumptions. So here's my question. What's the first time you remember pausing before you reacted? Now, what we might think we're after is that content, but what I'm really after is embedding those assumptions.
That you can pause.
That not only that they have, that they've done it more than once, that they have the capacity to examine themselves, they have the capacity to organize their own experience, they have the capacity to articulate that to me, that they did it with some form of willful intention or you know, they did it with some kind of deliberate intent. Those are all being conveyed in the assumptive of that simple question. And so think about what we do in the world of mental health is we tend to focus people on impairment, and then we wonder why it's so difficult for them to move forward. So think of the assumptions. Let me give you another one. So I want you to have experience of doing 2 or 3 of these where we look at positive assumptions being made. Or if you want to think of them as uplifting assumptions being made. Let's think you're working with a kid. What's the very first time you realized the rage monster was sneaking up on you? Is that a content question? Certainly. But what's more powerful is the assumptions that are being conveyed with it. What are the underlying assumptions?
That the kid can recognize when the rage monster comes.
I think there's an empowering stance with that. It's externalized from you.
Mm-hmm. You've separated the behavior.
So it's a little less blaming.
Mm-hmm. What else?
Looking at this strictly from the science point of view, just assuming that they're regulated enough to self-reflect, I feel like that in itself is very contagious and almost regulating.
Mm-hmm.
You assume I'm regulated, well, you're obviously regulated too, and I almost like let you take a step back.
Because the freeway. Yeah.
You can have this one if you want.
Oh, that's fine.
Are you?
As you said,
Here, we're just going to be doing some language use today. So if you think about that question, the pieces of it that are kind of fun to get across is, number one, you believe that they recognize it, that they have the capacity to organize their experience, that they have a first time that it happened, which means they probably have a second time that it's happened, that we've separated the behavior from the individual by asking it that way. All of those things are things that we have conveyed to in the assumptive or subtext of this. Now, whatever they tell us in content, that's fine. But what we want to do is to have the bulk of our conversations with clients be the kind that are leading, if you will, to positive assumptions. You know, we talk about empowerment, we talk about the ability to help people move forward, to move through their difficult things, and how often is it that we are not doing that? So, does that make sense as an introduction?
I can just jump in really. Right when I was turning on Maine, I was listening to a podcast, and the guy's talking about it took a group of female Asian students, and they put one group. They're taking a math test, a difficult math test, and they took one group and they said, "You guys would probably do well on this because you're Asians, Americans, and Asians do well on math tests." They told the other group same kind of. They told the other group, women have a tough time in math, and so do your best, like equally intelligent, whatever. And
Where's that wrong, by the way?
The group that was told, because women don't, they scored 20% less. So it's really kind of who you identify with.
Mm-hmm.
Same women could identify themselves as Asian, or they can identify themselves as women, or whatever the. So it's really kind of interesting that we're talking about subtext, and that just happened like 2 minutes ago. So.
Well, that's what we want to direct people. So when I was trying to explain this earlier in the week to this group that I was working with, I said, we have, if you want to think of it, we have a big neon red highlighter for impairment. And we have this big neon yellow highlighter for capacity. But what we spend most of our time in mental health is just taking, and I'm considering the highlighter as your assumptions or what's being conveyed. We're just highlighting and highlighting and highlighting with that red marker all of the things that are problematic. So by structuring questions so that you actually build their capacity, because of exchange after exchange after exchange with you, it is all capacity building kinds of exchanges. Even if you're going after really difficult content, you want to have them, you want to highlight their potential, their strength, their amazingness, not their brokenness. So there's a big difference. You can ask the same question, and one would leave somebody feeling uplifted and strong, and the other one kind of crashes somebody. So let's just use a really simple example. Let's say you're looking at someone that has come in and they are reporting a depression. So I can get the content of what's going on, with moving in either direction. I can ask somebody, well, when's the first time that you just felt debilitated by, this depression? Well, what have I emphasized?
The depression.
Even
They haven't always been depressed.
yeah, but they have been, and it was debilitating, but those are the kinds of language that we build into the world of impairment. But the other piece is, now I'm asking them to think, well, if there was a first time, was there a next time? And I'm doing the same piece, but now I am highlighting, my assumptions are all being highlighted in red. They're going to leave that exchange feeling more depressed than they were when they first started talking to me about it. I can do the same, I can get the same information by asking a different question. Because if I'm just looking at the historical appearance, how can I ask that in a way to highlight how they were strong?
Hey, Bob, can you put the phone closer to you?
Sure. I'm not sure that it'll help much, but
It's closer.
it's much closer, yes. So give me some suggestions. How would you ask this question in such a way that you get the content you need, but you don't highlight with that red highlighter?
When was the last time you didn't feel depressed?
Okay. Good, on the right track. What else?
Or when did the depression start?
Well, you could do that. But this kind of what we traditionally do, which is highlight
What's going on in your life when you don't feel as depressed?
So, you can come at it that way. So,
What about not even using the word depressed?
okay. So what would you use in its place?
Using, when was the last time you felt happy? Versus
Yeah.
not even bringing up that word.
So, but if we are trying to, particularly if we're trying to get information to feed into this diagnosis piece, one of the things that you can kind of play with on this is, rather than you're right, I would probably substitute the word depression for something else. But I would also really want to shift my focus. I want them to shift their focus too, don't I? So, so one of the things I might say, as you look at, and if I use the word depression, I might even, as you look at depression as you experience it, here where I'm going on the positives. What's going on with your body and your energy level at the time you're experiencing it?
Or what's your energy level when you're not experiencing it?
Well, I'm being very specific here. Where am I pointing them to?
Your body.
Into their body.
To the body.
And what am I asking them to do? What is my assumption?
That they can self-reflect.
That they can self-reflect, they can look at this body, they can kind of tell me what the body was experiencing, that they have the ability to articulate that to me. That's a lot more of a positive underscore to that, on a positive assumption, rather than what we tend to do is focus on the negative emotion.
And they have, or will gain capacity to, you can kind of control your body. You can't control your mother-in-law or whatever all the other, your boss or all the environmental things you can't really kind of control. So it's a good thing in that.
Well, the other piece, it sets the stage up for, they may say, well, I don't know.
Right.
Well, that's fine. Would it be okay if we kind of explore it a little bit? So when you look at depression as you experience it, and that's what we're making it, instead of an emotion, we're making it an experience. Hear the difference? It's hard to get through the emotion of depression. But if I shift it into an experience, it's just something you're experiencing. And like any other experience, it's transitory. So as you experience it, I'm wondering if you're like some folks where when they're tired or they haven't eaten well, they feel it more intensely than other times. Now what have I got them looking at? Instead of seeing it as an emotion, I'm having them look at it as a body state thing that's going on. That's much easier for us to keep them moving forward than if we open up and we highlight the emotional piece of this.
So could you go on and talk about sleep?
We can talk about sleep. How does your,
Yeah.
You can talk about, you can even talk about, if you're interested in the nutrition piece, you can talk about, what foods they tend to be most attracted to. The fact that you're assuming they have all this potential to be reflective just is an empowering reflection. Whereas what we have in a traditional view of, exploration of this stuff, we tend to exacerbate or to exculpate the pain or the discomfort that people are experiencing. We move almost immediately into feelings, into how they're experiencing the emotion. They have no problem getting into that piece already. That's why they're in front of us. We want to highlight the other capacities that they have.
I was kind of guilty of trying to go with a reframe, like cognitive reframe, pretty quickly, and just look at it differently. But it's kind of like that doesn't really build their capacity to kind of handle, because all this stuff's going to keep happening anyway. I think the assumption is we're going to make the waves go away.
No,
The waves are always going to be there, So
the thing, if you wanted to think about it, and this is what I kind of was discussing with that group that I was talking to, is you have whatever the situation is. What we have done in the world of mental health traditionally is we think if we can get into this situation, we can get into it and really understand all the nuts and bolts of it, then we can resolve the situation. What I'm going to suggest is a much more healthy and beneficial way is to help people get some distance from the situation and be able to talk about the situation from the role of an observer. And it's more empowering for them to be able to do this. We don't necessarily change the situation, but we change how they see themselves in relationship to that situation, and we change the situation.
I'm going to ask I'm not going to preface it and say I think it's a dumb question, but I just did. So if you were to say, how does someone, and this is for everybody to chime in on, how does someone like you, experience depression? Is that not honoring to their own experience?
No.
Or does that create it 1 degree separate, something like that?
So here, listen to what I did when I said it. As you experience depression, then I immediately shift them into the role of observer. Do you notice it more when you're hungry or haven't slept well, or or your body's just tired? So what I've acknowledged the situation and I pulled them back into a role of an observer.
I think it makes it more objective versus subjective.
It does, but it also creates distance from them so that they have, remember the way the natural body works. When we have that threshold that we can tolerate, the threshold of tolerance. It's probably not a very good acronym for it, but the threshold of tolerance. As soon as we exceed that, we move into either an adaptive process or we move into a mitigating process. So essentially what I'm doing is working with the natural way the physiology works. They're in some kind of distress here. They're already in a process of mitigating and adaptation. That's what symptoms are. Since I know they're doing that, let's just use it on purpose. This is actually a mitigation strategy. I'm going to move them into the observer role so that they can see themselves interact with their own situation.
I guess my question is, if you're asking them about how do you experience, your body, or versus almost like having them watch themselves and asking them questions like that. Does that make sense?
Well, that's your starting point. you have to touch on the situation and then step them back.
I keep viewing this as like a snow globe almost. How you want them to be able to look back on their life and not have any biases or have any influences in like their own little world.
I think if you have that threshold, you develop resiliency. But my experience, how my brain works, is if I get really upset or agitated or stressed out, and if I try to, take the deep breath and think of some positive things, I focus on the positive things, and then there's like a wave in my mind that goes to the negative.
Mm-hmm.
But then it goes kind of back and forth. And that gives me a little bit of a threshold to be able to self-regulate. And I think that's with other people, that if they can get a little bit of what you say, the observer role, then get a little bit of a threshold. I saw, I'm disturbed by a lady yesterday I saw. She had a stroke. I'll make it quick. She's doesn't have much movement. And she talks, and she's got brain function fine, but her speech is slurred. But she is consumed with negativity because of what's happened to her and the loss of what she had. And I tried to do that with her. And of course, she bounced back to the negative.
Sure.
But I guess that was just the beginning. I don't know. But I struggled because I wanted to be of help to her. And she said, when I'm alone, all I can do is think of the negative. So I was trying to build a threshold for her somehow.
Well, in the physiology piece of this, when people hit a state of arousal, not only do they move into this, but they also, they are not focused on the future. They become focused on this moment in time.
Yeah.
The other piece that they do is there's an emergence of, if you want to call them, ruminative experiences or worrisome fantasies, followed by an active inner critic. It's just the process that the body goes through. You've all had the same experience. You've been driving down the road and had police lights come on in your rearview mirror. At that moment, you're not thinking about where you're going anymore. And almost immediately you begin to do what? Think about all the things that could possibly go wrong. You're going to get a ticket. It's going to cost you a lot of money. And then you begin to then move into the character assassination. That was so stupid. I knew better than that. I should have been paying more attention. When you're in a state of dysregulation, that is the natural sequence. And as long as people are in that state, they're going to stay in that space. So, what we want to do is help create some room, if you will, some wiggle room in there so that they can kind of step away from it a little bit. So this is kind of all fun and abstract. Let's just walk through one and see if purple's not erasing too well. I wonder how the rest of this, all the rest is okay. Well, purple and blue are bad. Out of that, or I need to go get some cleaner. Hey, would you get that cleaner out of the white closet in the bathroom? I don't want to have to fight this whole thing. So I'm going to take a simple experience and walk you through it. So that, and then I would like you guys to be able to do it with each other. So it's a really big deal. It's in the. Did you find it, Kate? I don't know if I put it back there after it was finished. So. Yeah, that's better. So let's just take, let's take a trauma of some kind. We'll just walk through it. Will that work? So, you have one you want to do, or should I put one up? Okay, I'll put one up. Since nobody has one, it's fine. Jump into it. So here's our situation. It's a car accident. And leaves people partially paralyzed. And let's see, we're dealing with a 28-year-old male. Okay, get the situation? Now, there's that's the event. What's come from the event is a number of things. Let's just see if we can kind of put them out here. So, loss of identity. Does that make sense? What else would you expect somebody that had that?
There's a lot of stress with insurance companies and medical treatments and probably attorneys. And I mean, that's a full-time job.
Right, and also he lost his job. He's a construction worker. That's kind of
Yeah.
change in relationships. So that's enough to get us started. So they're coming in because they're feeling depressed and anxious and having nightmares and whatever else, the typical kind of PTSD-related symptoms. And these are some of the things that are primarily the problem. So it's this. Let's say this is a 5-year-old accident. So it happened when he was 23. So what we normally do is what? Think about how we normally approach situations like this when we begin to work with people.
Tell us what happened.
We ask them to tell a narrative. What else do we do?
Empathize.
Okay, that's good.
It's
Empathy. But empathy, as we interpret it, might be interesting. Do we usually think of empathy as a connection with the human experience? Or do we think of empathy as connecting with their pain?
That's an assumptive question.
It is. How do we usually conceptualize empathy?
I think pain. It's really,
That's what generally when people connect with pain. What's the problem with connecting with someone's pain?
Make sure.
kind of a terminal thing. It's kind of a dead end. There's really no
And you increase the focus on the pain.
You do. Here's another huge issue with using empathy to connect with pain, is if my relationship with you is based on this, and I should happen to start to get better, I jeopardize the relationship. You understand that?
Mm-hmm.
So how many times have you had somebody that seems like they're making progress and all of a sudden they just collapse? They don't move forward, or they, all of a sudden they're back having problems again. If that doesn't usually happen unless you're connected through their pain. Empathy, what we want to use is connect with their human experience. We don't want to connect through this pain. If we connect through the pain, what are we going to explore?
Pain.
All of their emotions related to this.
They'll keep looping through.
Yeah, it makes it more difficult for them to kind of move through this. What we want to do is have a complete understanding of what they're experiencing, but not not focus them on that part. You might think of another way to do this is you're really looking at kind of a structured form of curiosity. It is another way of kind of looking at this. So what do as you kind of look at this, how would you connect differently with somebody if you're just trying to understand their experience rather than how you connect with them through their pain?
It's like using those process
Yeah.
questions and subtext.
So, this thing happened 5 years ago, and you've continued to kind of move through and do some basic things as you've kind of dealt with it. And certainly, some of who you used to be has had to change. That's just an acknowledgement.
If in that language you just used right there was very specific, you didn't say change for the words, or that you've lost part of,
Yeah, that's right. I'm not underscoring yet. I'm just staying in the observable human experience. Does that make sense? As you've kind of had to navigate this in some way, what's the first thing that you've learned about yourself that's helped you get through that you didn't know before? Hear the question? Say it again. I'm going to say it a little faster because I generally talk faster than that with people. But so as you kind of look at this, and as you move through it, what's one of the first things? And I usually pause. What are one of the first things that you learned about yourself that's helped you move forward? What am I underscoring? Positivity, confidence, and they're going to give you the look like, well, I don't know.
Or I feel like they'd be like, I haven't made progress. And then you could easily say, well, you're here.
Well, generally, if you are, this is one of the nice things about focusing the question like I did. You don't usually get that. You will get, I don't know, because nobody's ever asked you to think that way. Because in order to answer this question, they have to move out of emotions into cognitive processing. It's just the physiology of it. They have to shift where they are in their body. Instead of experiencing the emotion of that moment, which is what everybody else has been digging into with them, what I am asking them to do is, what's this thing you notice about yourself? I've asked you a question that assumes you are a competent human being. Well, let's think of the underscore. You're competent, you're intelligent, you can look at your own experience, you can articulate your own experience, you can organize your own experience. You have done something. In fact, you've probably done more than one something.
That's whether I don't know, and you just sit. You just wait, and they'll figure it out.
And if they don't have something, that's fine. I just say, I probably asked that as a bad question, and I'll re-ask the same question. And I rarely have to do that 3 times before their brain is kicking in and thinking, well, I'm this. And no matter what they answer, now we can take it apart.
This is so important for me. I see a young girl. She's the only reason I see her is because nobody else can make any progress with it, and she's so angry and she disrupts the group home. So I saw her and she said, well, my mom was an addict, and I've been in one group home after another. She's been in God knows how many group homes or foster homes, and she's just, every one of them has turned to crap for her. And so I tried to look at resources and support for her. And this is so important because how she sees herself as being so done in life. But yet she's very resourceful.
Sure she is.
That's right, to deal with all that.
And the thing is that we sometimes want to just tell people, we want to point out their strengths. We want to give them the compliment. We want to give them the validation. But if you understand what's going on with the nervous system and how they're in that process of arousal, so you're fighting not only the immediacy, so they're not looking forward, but you're also fighting that inner dialogue that is both worrisome fantasies and inner critic. When we say, even those of us who are not in a state of dysregulation, a lot of times when people say things positive to us, it activates that inner dialogue. You did a really good job. Now, on the outside, you say thank you. On the inside, you're going, well, that's because you didn't see this, this, and this. A funny example of this, which I probably shouldn't record because if my kids see it, they're not going to be very happy with me. But here,
One of your friends' kids.
One of my daughters came out. She looked really nice one day. She was all dressed for school. She looked really nice. And I said, "You look really nice." And she blew up. And what was really going on with her, I mean, she did look nice. But in her mind, she did not look nice. This was the 8th outfit she'd had on. And the only reason she was in this one is because she didn't have any more time to change one more time. And how dare I tell her she looks good when she looks this bad? And, of course, oh my God, where'd that come from? But the reality is that when people are in that state, they can't absorb compliments, they can't absorb our validation. But we can help them discover. And that's the difference. When we're focused on their pain, we want to validate and we want to support. If we're focused up here, we don't try to do that. What we try to do is instead is help them discover, help them kind of look at this experience. So whatever they said, they came up with a thing. So what was my question?
Waiting for you to say it again.
What's one of the first things you noticed about yourself, I think, that you didn't know that's helped you move through this?
That
Yeah.
helps you move forward.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, what's the first thing you've learned about yourself that's helped you move through this? Or as another version of that might be, what are the first things you discovered about yourself as you've had to get through this that has allowed you to move forward and, be successful? Now, so they give you something. So we're gonna call that let's give me an example of what they might have learned. We'll make something up.
Let's say they have a really solid support system. They didn't realize how many people would come to rally around them. I don't know if that's probably not that.
Because of the nature of the way I asked the question, it's got to be something within them.
You're stubborn.
Okay, they might say, "Well, I just am stubborn." Okay, so I might say, now for you to stubborn mean you just won't quit. Okay.
Good reframe.
I think of this girl. I'm a fighter, and nobody's going to control me.
Perfect. She's in that social dominance game
Yeah,
with everybody.
and yet that's a strength. Right?
It is. Well, it is a strength for everybody. We're going to play with this. So whatever this, let's say that I won't quit is what they've come to discover about themselves, that they just won't quit. So, hey, Bill?
Who's in the ski lift?
Oh, Bill? Bill?
Yeah, I'm here.
Would you mute your phone? You're moving around so much that you're distracting the rest of us.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. So you won't quit. So let's play with this. Now, we aren't done yet because we're going to take this and we're going to build all around it to help them have some support. So won't quit. What were some of the things you had to look at and try before you discovered this one? Again, what's the underlying assumption? That they were actively looking for things, they were evaluative, they looked at a number of things, they chose this one. Where are they again? Back up here. Now, whatever the answer, it doesn't matter. So that was one of the things you looked at. Was there another thing you looked at? How did you decide that this was the one you could use over this one? You understand what we're doing? We're building all this around. So we're deciding that they explored. And I can just write it down around it. They chose. Now, once I've got them in this place, I'm going to go back and look at the loss of identity piece again. as we lose kind of a sense of who we are, or we're relearning who we are, what's one of the first parts about who you are today that you really like somewhat better than who you were before? Hear what you're doing? When I'm through with this, all around this, I might have 12, 13 different things that relate to this. I've moved them further and further and further away from the pain of this, and I've pointed them more and more and more. They're observing this, and they're playing with it, and they're manipulating it themselves. Now, after I've done that for a bit, I want to consolidate this, because what you're going to consolidate here is going to allow you to use it in the future. So if I had all these things out here, I might say, well, as I look at these, I'm picking up 2 or 3 ideas or themes, or I don't know, patterns. I don't know what we would call, but as you look at that, if you had to take some of these and kind of condense them into 1 or 2 words, what would be the first one? And so what I've gotten with folks before when I've done that, I had one, and this kind of might relate to what your case is. I had one where the person just said, I always stand up for myself. I always fight, and then as I kind of looked at that, well, I kind of have a mean fighting spirit. So then I put on the side, mean fighting spirit. So, and that's it. That's good. So this is an attribute that you pulled out of this. This is kind of a theme that you see because of all of this. What's another theme?
Strong.
One was strong, but generally that's not what they come up with. They don't usually come up with our psychological language for strengths. I've had them, one of them said, well, I have the ability, what was it? It was really funny. It was really, this is one that one of the folks we were doing, I was doing this earlier in the week with a group of people to kind of help them because they weren't understanding. And one of the people said this, see if this makes sense. Because they were saying, well, everything that when I decide to do something, I go at it and I just put all my energy into it. It's kind of like I'm one of those Energizer bunnies. That's what he meant to say. But he says, instead, well, I'm one of those bouncy bunnies. Instead of bouncy bunny, he goes, that one that goes like this? Oh, yeah. So we put bouncing bunny down. And so if you look at this, what it becomes is a list of attributes. And as they begin to identify these for themselves, it changes their concept of this. Now, it takes some practice to do it, but it's really delightful to watch the change in people. This is when I've talked about before using capacity language. This is what I just assumed everybody knew. This is what you do with it. But I was missing some of this for you guys. So I'll pull out 2 or 3 of these out of this whatever we're working on. Then I'm going to go to. I'll just ask for permission. Is it okay if we work on one of these other things? Well, yeah. Let's work on one of those. And I'll do the same process there. My goal at the end of a session or 2 is to have 15 or 20 of these. And every problem after that, every situation that comes up, every challenge that we face, what do you think I'm going to go back and relate it to? Yeah, this list. So, in your job loss arena here, where you're really feeling like you're underemployed because this thing has happened. If you were, we've kind of talked about that. We've gotten some things together. If you wanted to change this, which of these would you have to be able to use? Does that make sense? How would you use it? You realize we've taken their hurts, we've moved them into an observer role. Now we've identified how they're powerful. And we're asking them to choose how they're powerful to move forward. And somebody said, well, this is a strengths-based. No, it's really not a strengths-based approach. Strengths-based approach, you basically are kind of, this is really working in the language structure of how a dysregulated body works. Yeah, you can call it a strengths-based approach if you want, but it's really just kind of moving with the natural way the organic system works. Now, the first few times first few exploratory questions with people, they're going to be kind of lost because what they're used to is people focusing on the pain and hurt. And here you're not saying that you haven't been hurt. You've acknowledged the situation over and over and over again, but you're talking about it as a factual situation that has adaptive and mitigating consequences, and you're not getting caught up in the minutia of the emotion of it. Because what stops people from moving forward isn't the situation. It is that they get into that emotional world and stay there. And they ruminate and they lock onto it, and and every time they access that memory, it becomes richer.
You like accessing memory. I think in whether it's children we see, adolescents, I'll just go with that word. And you see these children that have such extensive abuse background, and they anticipate that will continue. And they are caught in the memories of that abuse. And I'm thinking of trauma therapy, and I've said that we don't have to focus on any detail of the trauma.
You don't?
No. And this really fits that. And I struggle in working in our program for juvenile sexual acting out or sexual misbehavior. And I feel like in a battle with not only other therapists but probation. The issue is not trying to regurgitate what their offense was.
Yeah, we don't.
And that's focusing on the pain.
Yep.
But there's so much, that's where everybody thinks you have to focus.
Well, and that's a leftover from that psychoanalytic, the Vienna psychology era that polluted our history. That there's this belief you have to exculpate the hurt, pry it open, dig all the stuff out of it, and then healing can be treated like how we would treat an abscess. We're going to purge an abscess, and then if we did that, then people can heal. Most of the time, what we want to do, because we're dealing with memory, and particularly emotionally related memory, what we have to do is really change memory. And how we affect memory isn't by opening it up and having people relive the intensity of it, because you always reconsolidate that memory based on the state that you're in. So if you're going to access the memory, go ahead and access the memory. We're doing that here. But what you're accessing the memory doing, instead of digging into the painful pieces of it, you're just acknowledging, yep, this happened. And you've had to deal with it in some ways. And maybe some of them that help, maybe they haven't. We're not really concerned with how that has worked. But however they've dealt with it, we're going to determine that is actually a quality of their character, quality of the strengths that they possess, part of the amazing humanity that they carry around. And we're going to draw from that a list of capacities that they have that we can then help them utilize intentionally. And because we were kind of doing this, I was doing this in Chattanooga, trying to help people understand how to do this. In fact, that pretty much blew off everything I was supposed to work on that afternoon, just to try to help people understand this process. If we can help them do this, they change how they see themselves. Also, they can't be having exchange after exchange after exchange where you're assuming that they are amazing human beings, that they're wonderful, they're powerful, they're decisive, and not be in a better state. And when the memory reconsolidates, you have a changed memory. Now, the next time that memory gets activated, as long as we don't have somebody else trying to get them back into the pain, they're going to see themselves differently in relation to it. We're not saying that this didn't happen. We're not saying it wasn't awful. We're not saying that they didn't suffer. What we are saying is, yep, that all happened, and you experienced it, and it was nasty. But look how you dealt with it.
I'm sitting here trying to think how I can like conceptualize this for someone who's like in denial or just won't admit to any progress. And I know I'm a little out there, but I can't help but think of the universe pictures you'd see in textbooks where it's like you are here in your little solar system, and then you get bigger and bigger and bigger. And sure enough, you're talking about stuff that isn't even related to Earth anymore or related to the trauma.
That's right.
You're talking about their characteristics that are so far and beyond that, but sure enough, before you realize it, you're able to talk about yourself. I don't know, I just keep getting this visual of, you know, those old maps where they zoom out and you're just like farther and farther away and they show you where you are in the universe. I just keep thinking of that. If that's your traumatic event and you keep building capacity, keeps going.
You know, I wish I could say that I was smart enough to put this together, but this has been around a long time. If you've read stuff that Bronfenbrenner wrote, you know, in the 50s and 60s, this is what he was talking about. You know,
He's not in the textbooks. You know
well,
what I mean?
but the Russian doll guy. That's what everybody comes to equate him with, the Russian doll guy. He's talking about this. You know, we keep focusing on that innermost doll that is the pain. And all we do is keep putting layer and layer and layer of more pain around it, and we don't understand why is it people are falling down and can't make progress. What we need to do is we don't change that. We acknowledge that, and we put layer upon layer upon layer about capacity around them. I had that bad thing, and this is what's happened because of it. Is that making more sense? I don't know if that's helpful or not. What do you think?
I think it's extremely helpful in helping other people and helping ourselves.
So what I thought might be kind of a fun activity is to have you guys work on it today. So you have an opportunity to do some, you know, practice. Pick a situation. You can either use one in your own life that's not too awful. Keep it relatively, but you know, the real goal is twofold. One, to keep them focused on some of these and help them explore you will know more about this event than most people that are digging into the pain. So you can't help it. It just naturally occurs. So you actually get more useful content. But in the process, you're also identifying a number of traits. And then you want to have them, from what they see in front of them, begin to construct a list of things. And somebody said, well, you know, then you converted it to, you know, strengths, right? I said, no, it's already a strength. You don't have to do anything with it, but just record it. Well, but it doesn't say, you know, determined. They're determined. I don't need them to use the language of psychology. In fact, I'm probably going to steer them away from it. I'm probably not going to use the word strength at all, because a lot of people that have been in therapy very long, and you say, well, you've got a strength, you made them scared. Now they think you're trying to manipulate them. So I eliminate that word from my vocabulary all the time. Is that helping? So what I'd like to do is have you just pick one piece and together kind of pick a piece of it and just build capacity around it. And when you get, you know, 8 or 10 different, you know, breakdowns of it, then start looking for what is the underlying pattern or theme or idea or concept. Don't say strength. That is working here. What do you think? You want to do one more as a group before you tackle it as an individual?
One yes.
Rest of you?
2 yeses.
Okay.
Never hurts.
Quietness means nothing. This is a.
Yeah, if there's any left over from the training.
What are you looking for? They're in the drawer or in the white cabinet up against the wall, the west wall. You know where the white cabinet is behind the door over here? There's 2 big boxes of them.
Oh, I think he knows.
He probably does.
Yeah. That's why, yeah.
He and Andy were here for the better part of the day. He was discovering where all of the goodies are hidden. All right. So I'll act as your scribe. Let's pick an event.
Traumatic childhood.
Well, we're going to pick one incident.
One incident. Let's see, I think some of the comments.
A real common one is divorce. Divorce for
Okay.
a child. It's not too gruesome.
Oh, we can. Or I can pick one for you, and you can just play with it.
This girl, either the woman with the stroke or the girl that
Well,
they
you want
took
to do your
away
group
to
home?
school.
You want to do the group home girl?
Yeah, I hate this group home. I can't go to the school I want to go to. They took that away. You mean, is that an event? Like,
Sure.
she can't go to the school she wants to
How
go
old
to?
is she?
God, I gotta remember. I think she's, let me think, she's 15.
She's 15. How long has she been involved in group homes?
Well, she's been in this.
I mean, how long has she been in this?
Attorney group.
How long has she been in this system?
Oh, she's been in there since birth. She was born, her mother was a crack addict, and DCS took her away. And she's been in one group home after another, and they've just all moved her out because of her anger.
So she drug exposed at birth?
Well, I would assume so.
Well, I mean, sometimes they are and sometimes they
Yeah, I would assume so. And they took her away at the hospital.
So-
I think so.
Has she ever been adopted?
I think I'm not, see, I've just seen this girl once, but I would assume that someone probably tried to thought adopting her, but she, because of her anger.
Okay.
And they have, because she's been in foster homes, I think she's been in a foster intended to adopt. She's been in group homes all of her life. And every one of them, yes, one was one that they were going to adopt her. But because of her behavior, they abandoned and rejected her.
Okay, how old was she, do you think? We doesn't even have to be really accurate, but
Well, she's 15. I say the one that was going to adopt her was 12. Nobody adopted me now because of my age.
okay, so this says she was 12 when she was in the adoption. The adoption blew up.
This testing, she tests everybody because they probably won't like me, and so I'll show you.
So,
Yeah.
so her adoption blew up. What are some of the behaviors that she gets into trouble for?
With her language, she mouths off and tells them. Won't use her language. F off.
Okay, language, anger.
Yeah, and because they won't let her do what she wants, she wants a certain food or she wants to do something. They say no, and of course it's become it's like a trap that has become tighter and tighter and tighter. And now they won't even let her go anywhere alone, go out of the group home because of her behavior. And that has happened in every place. She gets loss of freedom and loss of choice. And the more that happens, the more angry and the more defiant she becomes.
Exactly right. You know, I'm going to talk about the physiology of this a little bit, and then we'll come back and just play this a little bit. So just throw something at him, will you? Did you have a contributory comment?
I'm curious, but it's a little tangent, but like the types of people that get gravitated towards working in group homes and this like and like they get to feel kind of powerful because maybe they didn't and so they like to be in charge. I'm wondering if they just kind of seem to be a systemic thing that's not helpful. So I'm just kind of wondering that.
Well, as a part of it,
gravitate
one of the challenges is if you're going to work with group homes, you almost have to train their staff. And even that, unless the management says you will do it this way, it's not what they're going to do. So let's talk about the natural arousal process of human beings. When we pass the threshold of tolerance, we move into that arena where our physiology is in a state of active arousal. We move from that balanced system, which is our autonomic nervous system, it gets imbalanced. It shifts, and we become really sympathetic system dominant. When that shift occurs, the natural consequence of that is to move into immediacy, and it's just the nature of the system. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It just has traits that we need to understand. So let me kind of think of some fun ways that you've entered the sympathetic nervous system. You ever ridden a go-kart?
Oh, yeah.
So in the moment you're riding the go-kart, and are you thinking about homework you had to do afterwards? Are you thinking about planning for your retirement? Or are you focused on this moment in time?
That moment.
Okay. How many of you in the midst of having a good time, and you did something that was relatively unsafe? I don't know, like
Jumping off a cliff.
jumping off a cliff.
Into water.
Well, and my son and his friends put a zip line from one neighbor's tree to another,
Nice.
and they put the landing zip line about 6.5 feet in the air. Needs to be really closer to the ground. So, and the first person down the thing, of course, broke ribs, and because you can plow into a tree going that fast, and not end up in the emergency room. But in the moment, it was so much fun. Nobody was being rational. They weren't being cognitive. They were being impulsive, and that's the nature of this system. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way that system operates.
She's in that system almost
Well,
continuously.
but we tend to think that it's a bad thing, but it's just the nature of the system. And when you're in that system, you behave congruently with that system. You cannot behave any other way because that's the system that's in charge.
I find it so funny when caregivers are like, "What were you thinking?" And it's like they technically weren't, not very logically at least.
No, and the fact that the
Them
caregiver
asking that
asks,
question, they're not there.
I'm
they're
like,
not.
"See, that's not
That's what
really."
their parents said.
so they're in this place where they're in that state of arousal. Now, there's two things that come along with that. One, if you want to think of it in the silly way, is they've slipped fully into their primitive mind. They're what I sometimes call lizard brained. They are not cognitive. They're environmentally focused. The other piece is it activates that social dominance game, and there's an invitation to the social dominance game. We all get caught into it once in a while. Like if somebody kind of confronts you and you feel the desire to explain or defend, you are now in the dominance game with somebody. Because dominance is about competition or acquiescence. We're either going to compete with them or we're going to acquiesce. It's just natural. So what this girl's behavior really is is that she is not going to acquiesce. She refuses to acquiesce. And so when they come at her in any kind of an aggressive, punitive way, what they do is invite her to play the dominance game. And she has lots of skill in playing that game. And she's good at it. We see the same thing in schools a lot of times where the teacher has a dysregulated child, and what do? Is they invite the child to play the dominance game. Here are the 3 quickest invitations to the dominance game. Ready for them? The first 3. First, me trying to control you in any way, shape, or form. 2, me trying to restrict your movement or action. And 3, for me to force you to focus on what I want you to focus on. Those are the 3 fastest invitations into the dominance game. So what do we do in schools?
We do
That's
that.
what we do.
Sit down, pay attention to what I want you to pay attention on.
Look at me.
And yeah.
Quiet.
So, we move for control, we move for restriction of activity, and we demand focus. And as soon as you do that, if somebody that's well in tuned to the dominance game, they're going to either collapse on you completely and acquiesce. They're just going to give up, shut down. They're not going to learn from the experience. They're not going to have pleasant, but they're just going to be no problem. Or they're going to fight you. And then what we have a lot of situations like what's going on with this gal. She has people provoking her and she gets in trouble for it. And of course, that's what we've done in the wonderful society that we lived in. We put the responsibility for adult regulation on the child, the weakest member. We expect them to outregulate the adults in their environment. And that's a stupid thing. Not that I have a strong opinion about it, but you can't ask a child to outregulate the adults in the environment. You just can't. The adults have to be regulated themselves. If the adult lets themselves get into the dominance game, then both parties are no longer viable to create a positive outcome.
It always takes me back to the saying, like, be the bigger person. It's really that simple. In this case, when you're talking to people who can't stop dominating with a child or trying to, just like be the bigger person. And sometimes it triggers them though. You know what I mean? But that's what it comes down to, is just self-reflecting and realizing you're dealing with a child.
You have to be the kind of person you want the other person to be around you.
I'm upset with this, what's happened with me. What's happened is this girl has been to one therapy after another and sabotaged everyone.
Of course she is.
And they've said nothing works. So we want John to do EMDR to fix this girl. So I'm set up with this EMDR thing what they've done is set me up
To fail.
as I'm supposed to control her through EMDR. And she knows that.
Well, in
It's set
fact,
up to go bad.
a lot of the referrals that we get are in the way they're structured are invitations into the dominance game. Little Johnny, we don't like his behavior. You go over there and get therapy and fix that. In other words, go to the therapist who will control this for you.
Yeah.
Well, so what I might suggest with her is just do a little psychoeducation piece around the physiology piece. Now she's behaving exactly as she should be behaving. In fact, you might be able to do it more elegantly, but you're doing exactly what your body is telling you should do. And you are not crazy because you're doing this. Now, they may fire you after you tell them.
That's a different story.
It doesn't make it any less true.
So you have somebody that, and if you understand that's what's going on, then it's easy, rather than get caught up in the disturbance of something like this, is to start dismantling it. Because what we tend to want to do is want to fix this. We want to deal with the negativity of it. And really, it isn't negative. It's absolutely correct and congruent with the physiology that's on. In fact, expecting somebody to not behave like this when they are getting constantly pushed into the dominance game would be irrational. She's not going, what they want is someone to be acquiescent.
Submissive.
She's clearly a budding alpha. You can't push an alpha into submission, whether male or female. Not without destroying them. You know, but they wouldn't like it if you hurt her. You know, you really should keep fighting, and you should fight even more. But you might want to couch it in ways to be more successful for you. Is that a crazy notion? So would there be there's fear. Let's just deal with what might be reasonable fears with getting into a situation where somebody says they want to adopt you. Let's just kind of play with that a little bit. What would be a reasonable fear?
You're not going to like the parents.
You're not going to like them. They're not going to like you, no matter what they say. They're not going to follow through on it.
They're going to reject you eventually. They really won't like you.
Yeah.
So they'll find some fault.
Okay. So she's had a number of these kinds of awful experiences. So one of the nice things you can do with this for her is say, okay, you know, you have had a number of experiences that have really impacted you. Can you say that? It'd be absolutely true. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Remember, what we're doing is we're just staying now focused on what? Human experience, not the emotional content of it. You know, you've kind of developed strategies around how to deal with this, or ways of kind of getting through these situations when they emerge. As you kind of look at this, what's one of the first things that you've discovered about yourself that helps you get through these kinds of things? Hear the difference in the question? What am I assuming?
That she has insight.
That she's smart?
Smart.
She's competent? She has the ability to, tell me what it is? Now she's probably going to go, what? Because what everybody wants to do is correct her behavior, right? And you're just, I'm just curious to know how you get through this. You've had all these things happen. As you discovered this was useful for you in so many different ways, what were some of the other things you looked at and you decided, nah, I'm not going to use that one? When are the times when you've experimented with other things and they just didn't work as well for you as this one? You understand what we're doing? We're going to explore all around it. We aren't saying you shouldn't be angry. We aren't saying you shouldn't be aggressive and assaultive. What we're doing is exploring all the way around it so that we can see it. And we're going to do that until we get a good number of this, we can take it apart. I generally follow the same sequence. I do a first notice. I do often the most important. I will do what did you have to look at. I'm going to say explore for you guys. How did you choose? Those are kind of common ones that I usually go through. And whenever they answer with these, if they did notice something first, if that's the very first time you noticed it, what was the next time that or what was another time that you felt like you should use it? Basically, I'm just going to take it apart. I'm going to break it down. Now, you can take this as deep as you want to take it. I can also, what's the single most important thing that you've discovered to get through these situations when you absolutely have to? You understand? I'm telling you how to structure the words, but it's really a thought process. It's a way of looking at the situation that I'm asking you.
Yeah,
to
this
adopt.
has been very helpful right here. The thought process.
Because you can take it apart, whatever they answer. So they give you one. Well, if that was the most important one, what was the next one that's the next most important one? And I might get 3 or 4. What is it about this one that makes it just a little bit more important than that one? What are the situations you would use your most important one in, and what are the situations you might use this one in? You understand? I'm keeping them out here looking in my where I might have started with just a little circle around it. By the time I'm finished, I have a huge exploration around that situation for them. And once I have answers to these, then I'm ready to start putting my list of capacities down. So, if you were to kind of look at the answers for this, something like this. Does that help? Okay. So you want to do a little bit of in vivo stuff? If you want, I'll even turn off the video so we're not recording it.
If you're not, somebody else is, I'm sure.
So it'd be helpful if I just leave these up here for you to work with. Okay. Kate, go ahead and turn off the